On this week's episode, we will discuss the Lakers' daunting 0-3 deficit to the defending champion Thunder and likely the end of the season for the Lakers. Here we go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Matter of Stats podcast. Your host, Anthony, with you as always. And if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button below. If you want to enjoy great Laker content, this is the place to do it. So please subscribe, and we appreciate your support and help growth of this channel. All right, a bit of a somber tone, obviously, for Laker fans this week, as they face the inevitable end of series, end of season, daunting 0-3 hole to the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder. And for Laker fans over the last few years, it's a familiar place to be. Different year, different opponent, but essentially the same end results. And, you know, in some organizations, this would be still considered a very successful season. Top four in the West, despite the injuries, win a first round series without your best players, and get to the second round against the champion Thunder and play them well for about three-ish quarters per game before they just pull away in the fourth quarter, which has been the theme in all three of these games. However, for the Lakers, we know that's not the measure of success. The Lakers don't look at anything other than championships as a truly successful season. Now, of course, you can find a lot of positives in what the Lakers have done this season, and even in last season, in the JJ Redick era here, has gotten off to a relatively good start. All things considered, if you want to make a list of pros and cons, but we know that's not the expectation. We know that's not the goal for the front office, for the players, for anybody that wears the jersey, for the fans that love and support this team, for the city of Los Angeles. It's all about winning. It's all about chips. And at the end of the day, the Lakers once again will fall short of that goal. And in essence, the season is a failure. And it's been a consistent theme over the last, 3 or 4 seasons for sure. And there's lots of reasons. And we'll get into some of the key points of this series as far as the play, the officiating, the fouls, the whistle, the non-calls, the who hasn't played well, who has played well. But really, at the end of the day, the Lakers were never going to win this series. I honestly felt like they could win 1, maybe 2 games if they got lucky. But the only way they were going to win this series is if there were some multitude of unforeseen circumstances, such as Chet gets hurt, SGA gets hurt, the Lakers get a totally, lucky break, bounce, call, somebody has an insane 45-point game, or Luka magically returns, right? So unless some combination of those events was going to happen, the Lakers were really going to have a difficult time winning this series, no matter what. And quite honestly, even with Luka healthy for this series, I still don't think the Lakers were good enough, had a good enough roster that could compete with the Thunder in a 7-game series to find a way to beat them 4 out of 7 times. I think with Luka, they probably would have won at least 2 games, probably could have even stretched it maybe to a 7th game, but it just would have been, they would have had to get really lucky. But on paper, even with Luka, this roster is just too flawed. And we know that it's been flawed for 2 seasons, and there's been no improvements made to the roster to make it any better. So you can't just magically assume that you're going to take a roster that we know already wasn't good enough a year ago and not make any major improvements and just expect it to magically be better, especially against teams in the West that got better, right? Like San Antonio. OKC continues to just grow and improve their core. But the rest of the West didn't get any worse. They only got better. And some of these teams that were awful last year, like the Spurs, like the Blazers, were playoff teams this year. So it just shows you the level of competition, how high and intense it is here in the Western Conference. In the Eastern Conference, hey, man, any team's got a shot. But in the Western Conference, it's very difficult. You got teams that win 48, 50 games and are out in the first round or are in the play-in tournament. So are, 7th seed, 8th seeds, and just really don't have a chance. And the Lakers roster was never going to be good enough to beat the Thunder, even at full strength, maybe not even good enough to beat the Spurs. The playoffs are all about matchups. We talked about this a few weeks ago, the pros and cons, right? The pro of getting Houston in the first round was a win because we knew the Lakers could actually match up with them and defeat them in the first round, which they did. However, the con of that is then you would fall into the OKC side of the bracket versus the Spurs side of the bracket, where you might at least have a puncher's chance because the Spurs are young. I think you've seen that in their series against the T-Wolves. The Spurs really should be up 3-0 in that series, but they kind of blew game one, and that speaks to that, youthful exuberance that teams have to learn through when you get into the postseason. Teams have to learn how to win. Young teams typically don't win right out of the gate. It takes time. This Oklahoma City team obviously has been building this for several years to get to where they're at over the last couple of years. So that's just the maturation process of the NBA and how the postseason works. But that was the predicament the Lakers were going to be in. By getting Houston in the first round, you were giving yourself a great chance to get out of the first round, but then pretty much the kiss of death and condemning your season in the second round because there was no way you're going to beat OKC, especially without a healthy roster and without the NBA's leading scorer in Luka. There's lots of factors, into this series. We talked a few weeks ago about some of the keys, right? The Lakers are going to have to get support from the others. That's been wildly inconsistent in this series. Ayton has really struggled. Arabia has been pretty much worthless. Smart has struggled. Kennard has struggled. Even Reeves, struggled in stretches. Game one, obviously, was terrible. In the game 3 loss, he struggled to make shots again, particularly in the first half. And then, the third quarter, the Lakers have just had stretches in this series where they just haven't been able to put together scores. They haven't been able to put together stops. And we talked about some of the keys. One of the biggest keys being turnovers, right? The Lakers are averaging almost 18 turnovers a game. And we talked about how crucial that particular stat was going to be in this series because OKC leads the league in steals. They force a ton of turnovers. They're the best defensive team in the league 2 years in a row. So they feed off of their defense. They feed off of those turnovers. That's how they generate offense. That's how they get easy buckets. They're not a high octane offense. They're not a high octane three-point shooting team. So they feed off of that athleticism, that defense that creates turnovers, that allows their athletes to get out and in the break and get those one-on-one matchups, fill those lanes, get those fast breaks, get those open shots. And that's how they bury you. That's how they take advantage of you. And that's how, a 4-point game turns into a 13-point game because you have 3 turnovers in the row, bang, bang, bang. And the next thing you know, you're down 11, just like that. And that's happened in every single one of these games for the Lakers, particularly in the third quarter, because the Lakers have played very well in the first half and they've just struggled in the third quarter. They get a little sloppy. The turnovers mount up, and then OKC builds that double-figure lead. And in the fourth quarter, you just don't have the time and energy to be able to erase a 12, 13, 14, 15-point lead against this team in the fourth quarter because they're just too good. Obviously, a lot has been made about the officiating, but this is nothing new. OKC this has been sort of a rap on them, a complaint, if you will, across the league over the last 2 years. Obviously, we know SGA gets a lot of calls, but he's an MVP. Jokic gets a lot of calls. That's how it goes. Those type of players are going to get tons of calls. SGA lives at the line. That's nothing new. He's been doing that the last couple of years. And the rap on them over this 2-year run, especially, has been they get a favorable whistle. But it's not even so much the calls or lack of calls, it's their physicality. They're allowed to play a brand or style of basketball that allows them to be very physical. So they don't get those bump calls when they're pressing body to body on the perimeter. When the ball handler's bringing it up, they're bumping, they're reaching. There's a lot of hand in the back contact, right? That extended arm in the back or forearm in the back that you're not supposed to be able to do. And it feels like in the playoffs, especially, they're allowed to be a lot more handsy and body up their opponents and get away with a lot of physicality. That creates problems for their opponents because they're so good defensively and because they're so athletic, that by giving them that small little advantage of being able to have the hand in the back or have the reach in grab or the body bump when the defenders are bringing the ball up, that little advantage just adds that extra cherry on top to their already talented athleticism and defensive schemes. And that creates a few more turnovers, and that's when they get on those runs. So they kind of wear you down too by the end of the game, because when you're constantly getting pressured and it's bump, 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 reach, bump, bump, the whole game, that physicality wears on you too in the fourth quarter. So are those advantages? Of course. And could other teams do it? Maybe. They don't necessarily do it for a variety of reasons. One, you have to have the athleticism and the players to be able to have the foot speed to be physical, be on somebody, and still be able to recover and keep them in front of you. So that's obviously an advantage of their athleticism. But you also have to understand that that's the way they're going to be allowed to play, and you have to plan for that, right? You have to have a strategy or a mentality that's going to allow it to happen. And it's twofold. If you have the ability to do it, can you do it? They have the ability to do it. And in some ways it's almost unfair, because they're so good and they're so talented defensively that they don't need the benefit of the whistle. They don't need to have the ability to be extra physical. They're good enough to win without it. So I think that's kind of another reason why most people don't like it and why it bothers a lot of fans and media, is because they don't need to get that extra advantage because they're good enough without it. So it kind of feels like the rich getting richer, right? I like to use the example of if the government said everybody that makes over $1 million a year will no longer have to pay taxes, right? Then you would be like, well, why? Those people don't need to have the benefit of not paying taxes, right? It's the people that need that benefit. So it's kind of like that. It's an unnecessary advantage that they don't need. And I think that's why a lot of people feel like it's unfair, because they don't need it and yet they get it. But at the end of the day, that's not why the Lakers are losing this series. That's not why the Lakers are going to lose this series. They're going to lose this series, obviously, because Luka's not there. Reeves is clearly not 100% healthy. But they're going to lose this series because their team just isn't good enough. And we've been talking about this from day one. This roster hasn't been good for at least 2 seasons. They lack everything you need to be a legit championship contender. They don't have a deep bench. They don't have any athletic wings that are legitimate two-way players. They're not an elite three-point shooting team. They're not good defensively. Athletically, as a whole, they're one of the least athletic teams in the league. They don't have a lot of size. And when you add all that stuff up and you compare them to the Thunder or just any of the 4 teams that are left in the Western Conference, they don't have, what I like to look at as the 3 tiers of player that you need or type of player that you need to be successful in today's NBA. They don't have a athletic perimeter defender. They don't have an athletic two-way wing, and they don't have an athletic rim protecting big. So they're not good in the interior, they're not good on the perimeter, and they're not good on the wing because they don't have any of those. And you look at, obviously the Thunder have it at all three phases. They've got the athletic perimeter defenders, they've got the athletic wings, they've got the athletic bigs. The Spurs have it, right? They got lots of big athletic guards, wings, and obviously they got Wemby, right? Of course. Even the Timberwolves have it a little bit. They've got a couple of athletic perimeter players. Edwards is very good defensively. Jaden McDaniels is a great athletic wing, and Rudy Gobert is a imposing big man that can he's not a scorer, but he does rebound and he does defend the paint. So other teams have maybe not all three high level phases, but they've got two or three of those. The Lakers don't have any. They don't have one of those boxes checked. So it's one thing to sit here and say, oh man, they're at a disadvantage because they don't have all three phases of what you need to have a legitimate roster construction in today's NBA. They don't have any. They don't have one of those boxes checked. They don't have one of those type of players, right? Marcus Smart kind of, but he's on the older side, so he's not at that level anymore. He still provides great effort and energy, but you've seen it in this series. He doesn't have the ability to score consistently. The foot speed is not there because he's older. I mean, he's great. He's playing great. He's playing hard, but the Lakers just don't have it there. Reeves is not that kind of guy, and that brings a lot of questions into the offseason of how much are you going to pay Reeves, because it's pretty clear that you can't have Luka and Reeves as your starting backcourt and pay those two guys $100 million a year when they cannot defend. Reeves has been really picked on in this series. He's been taken advantage of, not just by SGA, but pretty much anybody in the Thunder jersey has been able to take him off the dribble and get to the basket. You've seen AJ Mitchell have a tremendous series, a lot of times taking advantage of Reeves, Jared McCain. So it's multiple players that have really taken advantage. And even someone like Rui, who's been great offensively in this series, he doesn't provide you that two-way defense. So the Lakers have to figure out a way to really address that. And it's going to be very interesting because I just don't know how you can do it structurally and financially if you're going to give Reeves 45 plus mil a year with Luka's, almost 50 mil a year, and those two guys are going to be your starting backcourt. You would have to have two elite perimeter shooting, high-level athletic defensive wings at the 3 and the 4, and a high-level athletic big like a Jared Allen or something like that could really, really protect the paint to have any sort of a chance if your two backcourt stars are going to provide you with no athleticism and be a liability on defense. So it's going to be a really, really interesting offseason for the Lakers. There's going to be a ton of pressure. I know we say it every year, but a ton of pressure on Rob and the front office to actually do something. The typical nickel and dime moves that Rob has done over the last few years is not going to work anymore. It is not going to work right now with this team if you want to be a serious contender anytime soon with Luka here in his prime, and if you're going to keep Reeves also in his prime. They've got to make significant moves to get real impact players, whether it's Atari Eason, a Peyton Watson, a Trey Murphy, a Jared Allen, Duran from the Knicks. I mean from the Pistons. Like, they've got to get legitimate pieces that are athletic two-way players that can really get this team closer to the other teams in the West, because Oklahoma City ain't going anywhere. The Spurs ain't going anywhere. And the other teams in the West will also find ways to get better. And all of those teams are more athletic, more talented, and have the pieces you need to compete. And the Lakers don't have any of it right now on this roster. So they're going to have to find a way to get it. And it's going to be hard to get it immediately or all at once, but they're going to have to find a way to really improve this roster and it might not be in a mega trade where you're getting another quote unquote superstar like a Giannis or Jokic or something like that. You may have to say we need legitimate NBA players that are borderline all-stars, because we need 4 or 5 of them, not just one guy, to really make a difference. I don't think that model works anymore in today's league. You have to have the depth. You have to have multiple athletic wings and bigs, and the Lakers just don't have any of it. And they're going to have to find a way to get it if you want next year's result to be any different than this year's or last year's. So we'll see. But at the end of the day, this series is going to end, whether it's in game 4 or game 5. But the Lakers will finish the season, disappointingly, despite their great effort and despite the fact that they really have actually played fairly well in this series, despite the outcomes. They've played very well for about 3.5 quarters. They just don't have the horses in the race to keep up with what OKC's got out there. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day, is the Lakers just don't have what it takes. They don't have the pieces on this roster to truly compete with OKC or any of the elite teams in the NBA right now. So that's going to have to change, plain and simple. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if maybe they can avoid the sweep, play with some pride, and maybe at least force a game 5 back in OKC. But whatever happens, we will be here to bring it to you as always. And until then, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Out of Stats Podcast.